Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a minute since my last video. It's because I've just been busy doing the podcast with Steven. We got a lot of great stuff coming down the pipeline. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But yeah, I actually saw a movie that I was excited about and wanted to talk about. Yeah, here we are. I've been really getting into genre movies recently, watching horror films. I got Shudder. So I've just been trying to watch more horror films. I've been watching more action films. I've got a video coming out sooner rather than later about an action trilogy that I really cared about recently that I watched. So yeah, I'm excited to kind of talk about this with you. But today I just wanted to talk about a movie that I saw last week called M3gan or M3gan, depending on how you look at it, how you say it. Yeah, it's this horror movie that I think was interesting in a couple of different ways. So I'll talk about it. So if you guys don't know what M3gan's about, it's essentially Allison Williams. She's back from Get Out, and she stars in this movie basically as this little girl named Katie's aunt, who, after Katie's parents and her get into a car accident, her parents pass away. Allison Williams' character ends up getting custody of her and tries to make it work, but she's kind of this robotics person, this robotics like whiz kid at this toy company called Funky, which I'm very shocked that they were able to pull off. It sounds very similar to Funko. But yeah, so she's developing this robot named M3gan. It's an acronym, and essentially this robot's going to like revolutionize toys. So she's developing this robot in secret, and she's having trouble relating to her niece, right? Because she's grieving, her niece is grieving and everything. So she's having trouble relating to her niece, and she finds that maybe M3gan can help. So she ends up like fast tracking M3gan and trying to get her operational so that she can help. And of course, it's a horror movie, right? It's about AI. It's going to be this kind of fear-based, like we have to not rely on technology. Technology's scary and can kill us, and if it emulates humans, and how our parents and how our caretakers are going to be in the equation. So it plays in a lot of different themes, but one thing that I noticed that I really enjoyed was that it seems to be kind of like this another entry in this return to kind of form of like these fun type horror films, right? So like I just kind of wanted to use M3gan as like this jumping off point to talk about two things that I noticed that have been interesting and within genre films recently, which is that these horror films, instead of doing like, elevated horror, right? I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and I had watched, like I said, I've been watching a lot of horror films, and I had watched the new Scream. Don't recommend that at all. It's a bad movie. Scream 5 is not a good movie. Yeah, I watched that, and in that movie, Jenna Ortega is like the first victim. Right, and she's essentially like, she gets the phone call, do you like scary movies? We all know from experience, seeing a Scream movie, like if you've seen a Scream movie that, obviously she's going to be a victim if she's asked that question. And she kind of gives this answer where she's like, I do like scary movies, but he's like, what's your favorite scary movie? She's like, I like elevated horror. So like she names off like the Babadook, and of course elevated horror is this thing that's been around for a minute. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of lumping it into its own subgenre, but I feel that a lot of filmmakers were playing in that subgenre, right, of these like horror movies that also had more to say, and they were a little more prestige. It's kind of like that term prestige TV, right? Like TV is like been around for a while, right? There's like network television, right? Like Chicago PD, Chicago Fire and stuff. And then there's like prestige TV, which is like your Game of Thrones and everything, higher production values. They look nicer, they have more to say. They're like more artistically like a higher caliber, I guess. I don't know if I agree with that one, but yeah, it's just like that's kind of the definition of elevated horror. It's kind of like this horror film that's more slow burn, more dramatic, it has more to say, I guess, and it's like the joke going around is like, oh, the monsters, and I've made this joke multiple times on the podcast, but it's like the monsters' grief, the monsters' depression. Right? It's like oh, this horror film where the ghost is depression, and it's like, okay, a lot of people view that and they kind of go, well, I just want Michael Myers or Jason to come back and like kill people. Like that's what I liked about horror movies. So for a while, like that kind of subgenre grew out, and there was filmmakers that kind of like made some incredible films, like Robert Eggers, like The Witch, and Jordan Peele, Get Out, and Us, and then of course Ari Aster with Hereditary and Midsommar. And these are great films, but there's like this kind of like longing to return to this kind of what I call the three and a half plus heart film, which I have said multiple times on the podcast, if you guys listen to that it's my favorite type of films. I love 5-star films, right? I think a lot of my favorite films are 5-star films, right? These films that kind of fundamentally change me, I think are so well made, and they have something to say, and they kind of like change me when I like leave the theater or turn off the computer, or turn off the TV, whatever. Kind of a fundamentally changed person with these 5-star films. So all that being said, typically like, I'm at the top of my ranking list in terms of like top 10 of the years are all 5 stars. But I love these 3.5 heart movies. I think these are the movies that I like almost more than 5-star films. Typically, it's like the movies that I go back to the most. Like if I'm wanting to something fun to rewatch, right? Which is like if you're a genre fan, if you like horror, if you like sci-fi, if you like fantasy, whatever genre you like. If you're a genre fan, you kind of enjoy these types of movies. These are the ones that you're coming back to these fun movies, right? And it's not necessarily mind-blowingly amazing, like it's not going to change your life or whatever, but it's like this fun movie that you're like, I'd watch that in the future. And that's something that I thought M3gan nailed really well. So I gave it three stars. I gave it a heart, right? Which is the heart's very important, and on Letterboxd, right? We go by Letterboxd ratings here. But yeah, it's kind of like this return to form. It's this haunted, people were saying it's like Chucky, right? Chucky's kind of a haunted doll movie. It's like this, it's like that combined with the hubris of like AI, right? Like this fear of AI, like Ex Machina or something. Like AI is going to, it's scary because it can emulate humanity, and if it emulates humanity, then where does humanity, fall in that equation, right? And I think like, of course, there's like the prime directives, like you can't harm people or whatever, and then like, there's this fear that, M3gan, who's like this android, who's this little girl, right? She's obviously harms people in the movie. That's kind of where the horror comes from, where her prime directive or like helping Katie get over her grief, protecting Katie from both physical and emotional harm really goes haywire. There's a part of the movie where it's like kind of plausible deniability on Allison Williams' character's part of like whether she was a bad programmer or whatever. There's like a very specific moment. I'm not going to ruin it, but you kind of see it's like the scene where they spill water on a like a computer or something, right? And it malfunctions. It's like, oh, okay, maybe something happened there. But yeah, it's just really fun. Like I said, this kind of continuing in this vein of these 3-star or 3.5-star heart horror movies that I've been seeing, where it's not necessarily has the most to say about like its own themes. Like obviously it's got themes. All films have themes. You have to realize that. But the thing about it is like it's not focusing on them. It's more about how fun it is, how brisk it is, like just how fun the kills are. Like, do you want to see it again? And obviously people want to see it again because they've been seeing it a lot. Like a lot of people have been seeing it, and they've announced that M3gan 2.0 is coming out. So that's exciting. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about like kind of this rise in these types of horror films, right? It's very fun. It's like I said, M3gan's a very fun movie, right? Like it's kind of like this toy manufacturer story, kind of like I really like the corporate jargon within the movie as well. It's almost very funny as a person who works in a very corporate environment, like hearing corporate jargon, right? Like just this guy really excited talking about getting it in front of shareholders, talking about like, or this toy company being like, well, we can't have kids here because it's going to ruin everything. It's a very funny kind of like throwback to those movies about toy companies, right? Jingle All the Way, or the Santa Claus, or any of these types of movies that kind of have to do with the toy companies, where they're like, I don't like kids or whatever. I make toys, I make art or whatever. It's very funny. But yeah, this was also interesting because M3gan's also this thing in this long line. The only problem that I really had with it, the reason I didn't rate it 3.5 heart, which I would have totally, but I felt like it was too online. And I think like one of the problems is this like marketing department. Like there's this clip in the trailer, right? It's like M3gan dancing, and it's like very much meant to be shared. And I think one of the problems with it meaning to be shared is like it being in the movie, it feels weird, right? And it's like there's this viral marketing campaign where if someone is talking bad about M3gan, then like an AI voice of M3gan will like read the tweet and like rewrite the tweet to make it sound positive, and she'll be like, "I'll fix it for you." It's very highly marketed, highly coordinated type thing, which is fine. All movies are marketed, obviously, but it's interesting because like last year, Smile came out, right? A movie that I actually liked a lot, a horror movie that I actually liked a lot, and more than most people, I think. But Smile had this interesting marketing campaign where it was like they were specifically targeting the internet, because they went to these televised like baseball games, these playoff baseball games, these basketball games, whatever, these events, and they would pay people to like sit in the seat and have the Smile t-shirt and then have this really creepy smile just staring at the camera. And I think it's pretty interesting that these movies, right, they're kind of like coming out of this period of elevated horror, trying to be more fun. Not necessarily not saying anything, but like just being more about like the fun experience. And I think like also it's kind of this communal experience that I've seen recently, where it's like this great audience. I've had a lot of good, like in Smile I had a good audience, and like Skinamarink I had an okay audience. Skinamarink's a little different, I think, but in M3gan I had an amazing audience. They laughed at the right moments, they got scared at the right moments, they were all like very vocal about not going in there and like not all this stuff, and it was a very fun experience. I think like that kind of also is interesting because it proves almost like that movie theaters are back, right? With Top Gun Maverick, that kind of demographic that wasn't going to movie theaters had started going to movie theaters again. And there are still people who don't go, obviously, but there's like a lot of people who will go. I mean, when I went to go see M3gan, it was it was on a Saturday like afternoon or something. Saturday at like 3 p.m. and it was packed, and there was playoff football happening too, so there was a lot of people to go see M3gan, and I thought that was really interesting. And like its fourth week, it was very great. I had a great time. But yeah, I find that like this new crop of horror films is going to be very, very interesting, right? Like we do have to see, it's kind of like a wait and see thing. Like we're coming out of this, like I said, this period of, there's still going to be prestige or elevated horror, but we have to kind of wait and see. And it's like, I didn't even realize, like my friend who I went with actually pointed out to me, he said like, she didn't kill that many people, right? Because it's a PG-13, so it's like not too terribly scary. It's not too terribly graphic. It is like, if you're afraid of like blood and everything, I wouldn't necessarily watch it, because it does have blood and it does have killing and stuff in it. But like, he was like, she didn't really kill that many people, and I was like, yeah, that's true. I just had such like a fun time. It was very funny and very, the suspense was really well built to where I was like more waiting for that type of explosion to happen. I think in the movie she kills like a dog and 3 people or something, or 4 people actually, right? So it's like a very interesting that he kind of commented on that, and I didn't even notice. Different people notice different things with it, and I find that like I was engaged the entire time. I do feel like it should have been a little bit shorter. There was some times where it was dragging, but yeah, the performances were good. Hats off to the young lady who plays M3gan. She was great. She's like this dancer acrobat person, so it's very interesting. Like she plays her really creepy, and of course the little girl, the girl who plays Katie, was also really good. I don't usually like one of my friends actually who doesn't really like child actors and actresses, that he liked M3gan, and I was very shocked, because it is a child focused movie, right, with Allison Williams as well, and she's great in it. I can't wait to see her in more stuff. Hopefully she does more horror movies. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about M3gan. I'm just excited for where these new horror films are going to go, and of course I've got a lot more content coming on the channel. I wanted to talk, I recently subscribed to Shudder, so I'm going to start talking about some stuff from Shudder. I have this video that I'm interested in doing about 3 specific action films, so I'm going to talk about a little more about genre films, and also I'm going to try and resubscribe to the Criterion channel. So I've got another probably monthly series coming out called the Criterion Corner. So I'm going to take either recommendations for it or just pick something on the Criterion channel. You know, it just gives me an excuse to have it and to watch these movies and to talk about them with you guys. So yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that's coming down the pipeline. And of course, if you listen to the podcast, we had a great guest last week, you know, talk about Grease and Blowout. So if you guys like double features, you should also listen to the podcast. All the links are in the description below. We also have a Patreon. If you guys want to subscribe, support the show, me and Steven do this all by ourselves, you know, and we'd love to bring you more content and everything. So if you guys right now the Patreon is just going for the podcast. So yeah, we're just going to have some bonus episodes there soon, actually. We just have to edit them and everything. But yeah, if you guys like this video, please, you know, like and subscribe. And yeah, if you like this video, subscribe. Hopefully you guys are excited about the next video. And I appreciate, you know, you guys tuning into this video to talk about M3gan and the rise of 3-star horror films. It's very much the re-rise, I guess, of 3-star horror films. It's very much a trend that I would like to see continue. So yeah, appreciate it, guys.